I'm delighted to say that Bernie Shakeshaft joins us now from Sydney. Bernie, good morning. Great to have you on board. Thank you for joining us.
Terrific to be here. Good morning.
It was tremendously moving seeing that again. I remember watching it at the time because you've lived this road. Why do you think you were so wild as a young one?
Oh, look, I think a lot of young people go through that kind of journey, It's that time if you don't know where you're going. I think it's a pretty tough time in life, those late kind of teens as you move into your 20s and you try and work out what's the world about and what's my place in it. So, I guess that just blows out in different ways, and getting through it, I think, is the important stuff, whether it's the uncles and your parents and different people, whether it's teachers that are in your life that give you a hand through those stages, I think is the important part of developing into adults.
Well, you've mentioned there the giving a hand, but I wonder if a big part of the problem might not be that once you've crossed a line, or if you've mucked up twice or even a third time, that's it. You often get written off and you get pegged with a label that's very hard to shake.
Look, and I think that was my lived experience, but I had people that hung in with me through those tough times and didn't judge. And looked after me, and I think they're pretty easy things to replicate. And if we look at the the growing number of young people nationally in Australia, I think they say 1 in 5 kids now under the age of 17, they don't go to school, they're not involved in training, and they certainly don't have a job. Where do we think that's going to end up? So we're seeing the numbers that we're dealing with now are absolutely on the increase, and they're getting younger. We're dealing with 10 and 11-year-olds now, not when they're 16 and 17.
10 and 11, and so what? They're out of home. They're free of any connection to either school or community.
Often right on the edge of being completely removed from the education department. Many of them are.
Yep.
We're seeing kids not make the transition now from primary school to high school, and I think, boy, if that was my kids, not even making year 7, getting to high school, we're on for a rocky old road.
Are you seeing any commonality to the stories that you're hearing about why these kids are losing their way?
Look, I think the problems seem to be getting more complex. There seem to be more single-parent families. I think as communities, we're not gathering them up and working together. Back to the old African saying, a village to raise a child. Yeah. I think as adults, we're the ones that are creating these problems. And if we're the ones creating the problems, then we need to be the ones finding the solutions.
So tell me about the solutions. We're looking at some of the kids here that your program has connected with and helped out. What are the solutions?
Oh, look, I think it's as simple as attacking these problems in a holistic fashion. The way that our government funded programs are structured, they just get too narrow. So we're, if your job is just to get your money from the education department, but the kid doesn't have somewhere safe to sleep at night, then he's never going to get an education. So I think what we do at BacKTrack very successfully is, A, we involve the community. The amount of support we get in Armidale to help these kids is extraordinary, and then we tackle whatever the problem is that presents, whether the kid's got legal issues, whether he's got nowhere safe to sleep at night, whether he's kicked out of school. Once you start looking at all those things at once, it's a pretty straightforward, simple model that certainly is getting some rubber on the road. We know it's worked for over 1,000 kids in Armidale. We should be doing more for, the same problems right across the country.
It's fascinating hearing you talk about the entire problem, because you're quite right. You might, find a kid and connect with that kid and find that child actually has a real interest and a passion for something. But if they're not getting backup and support at home, if they're not getting, for example, able to sleep through the night because of disturbances at home, or there isn't adequate nutritional food there, the whole thing falls down.
You're exactly right, and that's what we're seeing. And if we can identify the problem and we know what the solution is, then crikey, shouldn't we be doing something about it?
So look, you have that program, and you can see, when you're looking at the book, how it's a program that might be easily replicated around the country. Have you ever tried communicating that to other state or federal authorities to get them involved in a much more concerted way?
Look, we're working with the government. We want to work with the government wherever we can, because I think we can save enormous amounts of money and do enormous amounts of good as well. So we continue to talk to the government. We talk with the DPC, and our local members very supportive. But I think we've built this bureaucracy that's very, very difficult to change.
Yeah.
But you know, we're going to keep chipping away because I think the results speak for themselves. Certainly the politicians know, and you know, we'll just keep chipping away, and you know, we're going to get there in the long run.
I also wanted to ask you, for those people who might be watching this morning with that sinking feeling, thinking, oh, that's my boy, or that's my daughter, or someone I know. I think we're losing them. You know, we seem to be losing connection with them. They seem to be losing control of their young life as well. What's a couple of first early things you can do?
Look, at BacKTrack, our youth workers, we're all on the same page. Look for the gold and concentrate on the positive things. It's easy to see the negative stuff in young people.
Yeah, and to harp on what they're not doing and what they're not doing well. So you say, look for the gold. Go on.
So definitely looking for the gold, and keep putting opportunities. You know, what we've found over the years is when you can't kind of create the situation, but when you know, when something presents, you need to be there ready for the opportunity, and whether that's getting a kid into sport or helping him to read and write more or do something positive for their lives, you've got to be there for that long term, wait for those opportunities, and never give up.
It seems to me that you actually always need to have your communication, some kind of good, honest communication with that child in place the whole time along, because there's no point trying to step in later when the problems emerge, trying to establish that line of communication with them.
Look, I think you're exactly right, and anyone that's a parent will probably know that your own kids are the ones least likely to listen to you, and I think there's a key there in that message, and try and have older people who you trust that can take a leading you know, position in a young person's life and keep them there hanging in. And if you can get someone else to do it for your kids, you need to be doing it for someone else's kids.
Very quickly, before I let you go, I could talk to you all day about this, but we need to address the issue just briefly if we can, and I'm sorry to leave it to last, I shouldn't have, about closing the gap, because I imagine this is an issue that's affecting, well, is it affecting more Indigenous kids than others?
Look, if you've got the right programs, we don't talk about closing the gap, we smash it. You know, 85% of the kids that we work with are Indigenous kids.
Yeah.
And look at our track record of keeping them out of jail, getting them into jobs or back into education and training. Regardless of the colour of your skin or, you know, your nationality, where you're from, if you apply the same fundamental techniques for growing up happy, healthy young people, you can't not lose. But, you know, if you look at, you know, we're not an Indigenous program, but look at the number of kids that come in droves, you know, to join our program, and it works for them.
Bernie, I don't know if I'd want you in politics because I don't know what it'd do to you, and I don't know if I wish that on you, but man, I wish you were in charge of something. Thanks for joining us today.
Okay, terrific.